32 teams in 32 days, roster the people, summertime edition. Today it's just me and Mike. They abandoned us.
They did.
No, scheduling conflicts in the background, but the show must go on. Mike, it's a pleasure as always. How you doing today, big guy?
Good to be. Yeah, we're in our AFC South section, like time of year, right? It's Texans, Colts, and then Jags in the next video. So
it's because we do it alphabetically by city,
yep.
and for some reason it lines up this way every year.
Yep.
It's wild.
It's
just
good.
The way that works out. But as always, this is your primer for the 2024 fantasy football season. We will take you through every single team. You're going to hear us talk about our opinions on players today, as you can see from my background. The Indianapolis Colts. Also, you read the title, so you knew. The way this works is pretty simple. So it's the format that we're doing is 12-team PPR, 16 rounds, standard draft. That's the format that most people play at this point. Single quarterback. We will talk about other players, or other formats as need be if there is something of note. Today is the 2nd of August, so if we say something that sounds a little bit dated, that would be why. Go ahead and check out the wrap-up show, which is tentatively scheduled for August 31st. Might be the 30th, might be the 1st. We're going to find out. It's going to be one of those days. We're going to do big wrap-up live stream. You'll get plenty of notice. We're going to update any takes that need to be updated. You will hear us reference a lot of rankings and ADPs. Those come courtesy of Fantasy Pros. We are a Fantasy Pros affiliate. Thank you, Fantasy Pros. And with that, let's just get right into it. So this one's kind of messed up, Mike, because it's Anthony Richardson, right? Yeah. So I'll defer to you, and then I'll get into. I have thoughts on Anthony Richardson. So, but I'm curious, what's your immediate reaction to this whole situation?
Man, I love Anthony Richardson for fantasy. Generally don't take quarterbacks this high. Now I'm someone that does play in multiple leagues, so I feel like there's going to be a league where I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm going to break my rule.
Like we all play in multiple leagues. If you're watching this and you only play in one league, just hit the subscribe. Yeah. If that's what you're doing.
Yep. But there's going to be a league, I think, where I'm going to break my rule, and I might take Anthony Richardson, late in the 4th or early 5th, if I can get him there, which is kind of where his ADP is, right there at 50.
Well, I was going to hang on. I wanted to get your immediate reaction, and I was going to do the read-in like we normally do. So hold on, I'll do it real quick.
Go for it.
So Anthony Richardson opens as the QB5, which should translate to 47. Standard PSA here about how quarterbacks have been rising up the ECR for the last few years. Whether that's correct or not is debatable. But his ADP is 50, so the public's not scared. The public is not scared whatsoever. So that's where I wanted to get your immediate reaction. Sounds like you're not scared either, because what we are discussing is a 4th-round pick for a quarterback.
Yes. Yeah. We were right at that 4 or 5 turn, right? So
no, because it'd be 36, so you'd be at. It's a little before the turn. 3 rounds is 36, so you're at like
48,
40. Yeah. So you're not quite at the turn. You're slightly before the turn. So you're committing to this if you're going to do it.
I mean, you just look at his. I know it's such a small sample size, but week 1, 22 points. This is 4 point per passing touchdown, and he got hurt at the 1 yard line, and he could have scored potentially. Week 2, I think he played like 30% of the snaps and scored almost 18 points. And then week 4, 30 points. And then he got hurt in week 5, and that was it.
I'll tell it differently because I have the stat for this. So before he was shut, you just read off the sample size. Before he was shut down, he was the QB2.
There you go.
He played, we're going to call that 2 games.
Yeah, it's like 2
You know what I mean? Like, we're going to call that, it's like 2 games and change. He played 2 games as far as I'm concerned, and he was the QB2. So the upside is undeniable. That's how we've arrived at this point. But I would like to talk now about the catastrophic risk that one would be undertaking by doing this. Because, yes, the upside is insane, but we just saw him get hurt. I do not feel that this... I just don't feel like this individual is inclined to change his playing style at this point in his career. So the risk of him getting hurt again is pretty significant. I acknowledge that, that's not a guarantee, and anybody could get hurt at any time. I could get hurt going to get a beer out of the fridge, which I am absolutely going to do when we are done doing it. Like, anything could happen. Life is chaos. But there is the idea that he's a big guy, but he's going to run. He did it all through college. That's kind of what his thing is. Like he's a big guy who can run really well, and he can throw it. And then we get into the throwing, and this is where the knock on Anthony Richardson has always been, even in college, the accuracy. The accuracy is, especially some of the interesting throws on the run he likes to do. And I was hoping last year you would get a development year. You could kind of see what you're working with. Nope, played 2 games effectively. Most of it hurt. And so now we don't know. But the biggest thing for me is he lost all that practice time. So all that time that he should have been working on his accuracy, kind of rehabbing. You can't practice when you're rehabbing, right? You know what I mean? So it's like this is what scares me, is giving up a 4th round pick with the upside is definitely worth the 4th round pick, but the markers on doing this, I get the idea that scared money don't make none. You know what I mean, Mike?
Yeah.
And I get how tantalizing this is, but I just want people to understand that it's a little scary.
It is. It's QB1 overall difference making potential, in my opinion. And I always think about like
not a far trip. Not a far trip. It's 4 It's 4 spots. He's the QB5. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, like, a guy. I know you guys talked about CJ Stroud yesterday, and he's up there at QB6. Like, there's no way in hell I'm taking CJ Stroud over Anthony Richardson. Like, it just
no.
We're talking
that
about,
would be insane. I wouldn't do that if I was committing to this idea of taking a quarterback early and Lamar was somehow gone. Oh, this is it, baby. This is what you're doing. Like, because if you're committing to that mindset and that's how you want to play, okay, then this is it, man. Because what would you like more? Because he's in my rankings, he's top 3 because you know what he's going to do. He's going to run. It's like, for me, it's Lamar, Jalen, Anthony. That's my rankings. And I can see why people would be like, Neil, Patrick Mahomes. And it's like, we'll talk about Patrick Mahomes. Like, I get it. Patrick Mahomes isn't going to run like this anymore. And yes, he's superhuman who can, score from all over. But that team is, we'll go through it.
Yeah.
That team's scary. This is,
definitely invest in a backup. If you take A-Rich, invest in a backup.
The backup is Joe Flacco. This is the other reason this is interesting. The man who came off his couch effectively and lit up the NFL for the Cleveland Browns. Yeah. You knew he was going to get another contract, and here it is. So the Colts are like, well, we know we need a quality backup. So what do? We just pay Joe Flacco. So it's almost like they're tipping their hand. Like, we know like what we're doing here. And so the nice thing about it is it relates to the skill position players, as we'll discuss. Having Joe Flacco there actually does make me feel a little bit better because if something does happen, you don't crater it out. My other thing about Anthony Richardson is that we're going to get into this. It's a little bit of a recurring theme. The inaccuracy scares me as it relates to some of his weapons because we didn't get the development. I wanted to see what we were working with, and now we're right back to where it is. So it's a little scary, but I wouldn't recommend this. I don't recommend this. I don't co-sign it. Because, yes, he's my quarterback 3, but quarterback 3 for me is, like, lower. We're not taking quarterback. That's not how my rankings work. The reality of this is this is like this is for people who like to go play roulette. You know what I mean? Like, go to the craps table and just, like, try to run it out.
If you play in like a $200 league, maybe pass it. If you play in like a $25 league, go for it.
Rip it.
Yeah. Go for A-Ridge. So
but the inaccuracy is what scares me. The lack of development, but the upside of the rushing floor, just the creamy, amazing rushing floor with all those rushing touchdowns that are just waiting for you. And then you will have some passing touchdowns. Yes, there's going to be turnovers, but my God, like just the point factory that this is. And this is a decent team. This is a good team. This is a team that's trying to go back to the playoffs. Like, we'll get into the offense here. So, but yeah, Joe Flacco, don't need to draft, don't need to handcuff. I just bring it up because it's important to be aware that that's where he landed. But yeah, if you're a gambler, Anthony Richardson. If you're a member of our Wall Street Bets, Anthony Richardson. YOLO it into the wall, but I don't play that way. Returning Jonathan Taylor at running back opens as the RB5, which would translate to 13 overall. His ADP is 10. No one is scared. So normally you see a down year. After a down year, you see a drop at running back, especially. That's just human nature. People are conditioned to remember the last thing they saw. So that's just statistically been proven. But Jonathan Taylor is not experiencing that kind of dip. Mike, any idea why?
Not really, actually. Like, I mean, maybe it's just the lack of running backs. We've talked about it in multiple videos. The second round gets ugly quick. That could be part of it, raising him up a little bit. He is one of the few, 4 or 5 guys that is going to, carry the load. He's going to be the workhorse. We expect this offense to be better. Now, is that going to translate into Jonathan Taylor being better? I don't know. I think there's some risk there. I put a note here if you want me to get into that about rushing quarterbacks. At 19 quarterbacks have rushed for 700 yards or more in a season since 2000. And the highest finish for one of those running backs that have a quarterback rushing for 700 yards is RB4, Marshawn Lynch. And only 4 of those 19 running backs were top 10. 11 of the 19 finishes RB16 or worse. So rushing quarterbacks, like we kind of think, they open up the run game potentially for running backs, and maybe, but like especially
themselves.
Yeah, and it hurts because generally they're not going to pass the ball as much. We see that with Lamar. We see that with Jalen Hurts, right? And those guys that were finishing in the top 10, those 4 of the 19 running backs that were finishing in the top 10, their quarterbacks weren't really big touchdown guys. They were like Russell Wilson with 6 and Lamar, who's never been a big touchdown guy. Anthony Richardson scored 4 rushing touchdowns in those 2 games and change. Like he could have 10, 15 rushing touchdowns. It could be just him at the goal line, like Jalen Hurts has been doing, and the tush push, which Shane Steichen comes from Philadelphia, and he was there when they started the tush push. So it's a little concerning there. Like I don't know if he has much upside in terms of like, can he get to I think top 5 is kind of his ceiling, in my opinion, and we're drafting him there. But it is hard to, it's easy to forget that he had one of the best pure rushing seasons like we've kind of ever seen, over 1,800 yards, average 5.5 yards per carry back in 2021. So I get why he's here, but I do think we're kind of taking him at his ceiling a bit.
I did want you to get into your notes. That's why I specifically threw it to you.
Yeah. I figured.
The other thing is, I agree with what you're saying. Jonathan Taylor, I'm not worried about the injury. What I'm worried about is Anthony Richardson again. Because the whole reason he projects to be such a valuable thing is that he siphons off from everyone around him. And it's like, that's how that works. It's just the way that you're going to cannibalize into other people's roles. And the one thing that I am not totally sure on, though, is this. Knowing that Anthony Richardson had got hurt last year, do they try to limit him near the goal line and let Jonathan Taylor do his job? I could see that being a legitimate argument. But we're going to have to wait and see. I do agree with the idea also that you are drafting at his ceiling. You are definitely drafting at his ceiling, but then here's going to be my caveat to drafting at the ceiling. Let's go through running back as a position very quickly. By ADP, that's half scoring. Hold on. I don't want half scoring.
Real quick. Also, it is the first round, so you're kind of drafting everyone kind of at their ceiling, right?
Well, that's part of it, but here's what we're going to do. Here's why that is totally part of it. But here's what I want to do. Here's the running back as a position right now. CMC, right? This is ADP. This is not rankings. This is ADP. ADP PPR scoring. So number 1, CMC. 2, Breece Hall. 3 is Bijan. 4 is Saquon. 5 is Jonathan Taylor. 6 is Gibbs. 7 is Kyron Williams. 8 is Travis Etienne. 9 is Derrick Henry. 10 is Pacheco. 11 is Devin Chan. 12 is Josh Jacobs. 13 is James Cook. Do you see how fast the cliff comes? Because the cliff comes so quick that I'm almost willing to just draft Jonathan Taylor at his ceiling just based on the idea that he's still going to get plenty of work in an offense where he is the guy unquestioned. Because how many of those other people are the guy unquestioned? I would argue he's one of 5, and that's why he's 5. Is that you rank all the guys that have the jobs in themselves. CMC, no threat from anyone. Breece Hall, no threat from anyone. Bijan, limited threat from Tyler Algier, but not whatever. Like Saquon, no threat from anyone. And then Taylor. And then after that, it's Gibbs. Kyron technically has no threat from anyone, but that's still like, we'll get into that on that show. That's kind of still like, we saw you do it once. Can you?
Yeah.
What is that? So I think that's what that is. But and then Derrick Henry, no real threat from anyone. But Derrick Henry is new
He's old.
team, old. None of
Yeah.
those other guys are old. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so see my
And I,
point?
yeah, and I still believe in fantasy football, and maybe it's more my old head coming out, but a top tier running back is still the most valuable thing you can get because we just talked about there's so few of them, and if you
Me,
get
you,
that
and Mason.
CMC,
Me, you, and
you
Mason have
know,
to sit down because Mason has the opposite opinion because Mason's Mister
no, no.
Passing Football is the future guy. We have to
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
We should do that at some point, possibly on the wrap up show and talk through that philosophically
yeah.
because he was doing that. He was talking about the Texans and he's like, no, they don't care. Like they're just gonna throw, and they're gonna just it's what they're gonna do. And he's like, we see it. We're starting to see that as a philosophy at PFF. And I'm like, okay, I'd like to hear.
Mhm.
I'd like to hear the full uncensored thoughts on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you and I are more or less in alignment. Jonathan Taylor, worth it, but know that you're going at the ceiling here. There is a risk of him having a new mobile quarterback to siphon off some of it, and he's coming off the injury. But you can't question that he's the guy on a team that is going to run the football, like consistently going to try to run the football. Like that's part of their identity. He's going to get
Yeah.
plenty of work, and the list is very short. And yeah, I'd rather pay up for a high priced running back because you just don't. I know the risk of injury is higher than taking a high end wide receiver, but the upside at this point because there's so many more wide receivers. I can fill that out a lot better than I
Mhm.
can replace like a true top 5 running back.
Yeah.
So wide receiver. Speaking of Mason, actually, check out PFF if you're subscribed to PFF, and if you're not, maybe think about it because Mason wrote a really nice article about the guy we're going to talk about first, Michael Pittman, talking about his performance over the last few years, and he and I were having a conversation off camera about it, where it's just Michael Pittman does everything well.
Mhm.
There's very little deficiency in his game. He can kind of just do everything. And he hasn't gotten the respect for years. I've been preaching about this on this show, actually, and all through the season. He doesn't get the respect that someone of his caliber is owed. And the problem is now he's starting to get the respect.
Yeah.
I've done too good of a job, and he's played too well. So Michael Pittman opens as the wide receiver 19, translates to 34 overall. He's going at 36. So you're talking about a very, very early 4th-round pick. So you're still getting a pretty good deal. What do you think about Michael Pittman? Acknowledging that the price tag has moved up over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I'm fine with it. I think wide receiver 19 is again. He seemed very safe, especially in PPR, because the guy's going to catch a bunch of passes. I do wish we talking about it with Anthony Richardson, small sample size. I really do wish we got a little bit more just to see how it was going to work because we had one game where he had like 11 targets, and then another game where he had like 5.
Well, there were
So
11 Anthony Richardson targets, so like 6 of them were catchable.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's part of the problem.
yeah,
Those targets are all scratched and dented. They're not
yeah,
they're not uh they're not Patrick Mahomes targets. You know what I mean? Like things like that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Not all targets are equal,
yeah,
right? So,
exactly. You can get lots of
um,
targets, but if they're Aiden
mm,
O'Connell or whatever that guy, like I don't
yeah,
know about that. Like
I I do wish they used him just a little bit more like downfield, and maybe
mhm.
they will, because Anthony Richardson has a huge arm, so kind of give him those explosive plays. He hasn't been a big touchdown guy. I don't know if that's going to change either. I mean, he had 4 out of I think like their 18 or whatever they had passing, so it's not terrible percentage
He didn't
wise,
have
but
no touchdowns, but he's not lighting the lamp. He's not a 10 touchdown guy. To your point from
yeah,
earlier.
yeah. So, it feels very safe in PPR. I think he'll be a top, a low to mid wide receiver too, and that's kind of where you're taking him. And I think he'll just give you that consistency. And again, maybe we're missing something here because we didn't see it with A Rich, but there's other target competition there. But you can't deny the guy's he's just a target hog. He had almost 160 targets last year, so. He's an
Well,
absolute target hog.
there's a reason that every quarterback, and they've had a quarterback carousel
Yeah.
through this team for the last few years. Every year it's somebody new. Give it a shot. And there's a reason that every single quarterback that hoves through the building is like, oh, I'll pick that guy.
Yeah.
Like, because there's something he's doing that is separating him from everyone else consistently, and it's just because when you really break it down, there's nothing he doesn't do well. He's got a full,
Mhm.
complete route tree. He's big. He's got good hands. He can high point a football. He He gets out of his breaks well. He's got good release. He's a nightmare. He's just like he's a big guy when you just break it down, and it's like he can position himself well. And once he and the quarterback get on the same page, there's a reason the ball comes his way consistently. The
Yep.
the only concern I have is Richardson, just what I mentioned before about there will be plenty of targets. I'm not worried about the targets. It's just where are the targets going to be? Like are the targets going to be catchable targets or are we? And then there are some other concerns that I have about just the total passing numbers dipping.
Yep.
And that's the other thing, just with a guy who's going to be so much more prone to taking off and running that, yes, he's got a cannon and he can throw it a mile. But the question I have is, does he not just take off and run more consistently? And that just starts lowering the total targets from what we saw under Minshew last year, for example. So that's the concern. But I feel like some of that is baked in. I'm still going to recommend Michael Pittman, but I do have more concerns this year than I do in others. Normally, my advice on Pittman has just been, yeah, 100%. This is exactly something I'm targeting. I have it circled all my for all these reasons. This year, it's like, okay, now we have to actually pay like a 4th round pick as opposed to like a 6th, 7th round pick, which is what, boy, those days were sweet. That's like when Hershey bars cost a nickel. So you can't not doing that this year. So it gets a little scary the higher up we go.
Yeah, there's I know we talked about this actually probably last year. We were talking about the Colts of this, this RPO style of offense where they're going to run 20, 30% RPOs. And when you do that and you pass the ball, you have to get it out quickly or else you're going to get a penalty for offensive lineman blocking downfield. So, and a lot of that's going to go to Michael Pittman. He's going to get a lot of those easy targets. So I still think you'll have maybe not 160 targets, but you'll have a huge percentage of it. And yeah, it's just frustrating because, again, Anthony Richardson, his first game, 37 pass attempts, and then his other healthy game, 25. So it's like, are we going to get 25? Are we going to get 37? Are we going to get somewhere in the middle?
That's a big difference. Like the number of pass attempts. You can't 17 pass attempts. So it's not it's just frustrating a little bit, like you said. Frustrating is probably the right word because of past performance, his stock is now expensive. It's up where it should be. But now we have these weird markers with Richardson, and it's just a little hard to want to pay full retail. But I would still recommend it. I would co-sign it. If I'm sitting there and he's my wide receiver 2 in the 4th round, you know what I mean? I probably don't hate my team.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to recommend going ahead with Michael Pittman, but just know that I'm a little more hesitant to do so than other years when I've just been wheels up. Like, let's go. Yeah. Next up is Josh Downs. So last year's rookie, slot specialist and PPR monster potentially. Josh Downs comes in as the wide receiver 58. That translates to about 139 overall. His ADP is 140. This is actually very attractive in my opinion because it's something that I could get for what I believe is way below what it should be. Because when you have a young quarterback, they need a safety blanket. And we already saw a limited sample again, but we already saw, and following the camp reports, it seems like Richardson's favorite short yardage target is Josh Downs. And it's a shame because Josh Downs was on his way to a very nice rookie year before he hurt his knee in week 9 and was just never the same. And but he's had it all off season. He's healthy now and he's looking great in camp. So for me, this is the one that I actually am looking at on this team where I'm like, okay, we finally found a value that I like. Yep. So I'm a big proponent of this, especially in the late rounds, is getting Josh Downs and just seeing what you get.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny because normally we see a rookie with 70 catches and almost 800 yards. You're like, that's a good rookie season. Look at his numbers, Josh Downs and Jaden Reed's numbers. They're very similar except for the touchdowns, right? Obviously, Jaden Reed had 10.
That's because Jaden Reed is a monster.
So
Josh Downs is still mortal.
Yeah. In terms of the raw receiving numbers and not touchdowns are a little bit hard to predict and things like that. So good numbers from him. Like you said before he got injured, he was putting together a really good season. So I like taking a chance on Josh Downs here.
Yeah, it's annoying because it makes me have to not fully support my man Michael Pittman. But yeah, Josh Downs is the one that I'm like, okay, this could be something. It wouldn't shock me if he played the whole year that he was well into 1,100 yards receiving. You know what I mean? And it's all
Mhm.
dump offs, but I don't care. Like I'll take it how I can get it. I think he'd be an excellent bye week fill-in. And if
Yeah.
something was to happen, I
Yeah.
think to the moon potentially. But you don't need him to go to the moon. It's not priced that way. It's perfect. It's a great choice. What I'm
Mhm.
less enthused about is the next name on the list, which is Adonai Mitchell, this year's rookie. Opens at wide receiver 65, 158 overall, and by ranking, his ADP is 154. I'll pass.
Yeah.
I didn't like him in the pre-draft process. I don't really like him now. I'm actually just not sold that he's going to be able to break into this lineup if everybody stays healthy in his rookie year.
Yeah. There's concern with that for sure. I'm in agreement. I'm not a huge AD Mitchell fan, and he could be out there if he beats Alec Pierce out. He could be out there 90% of the snaps. But we saw that
Mm-hmm.
last year for Alec Pierce, and that meant nothing, So, but he does have to beat out Alec Pierce, who's going to do the dirty work as the X receiver type of player.
This is where
So,
we need the nerd, because the nerd would take the next 10 minutes and write a love letter to Alec Pierce, because that's what he does. I know this because we had a conversation about it off camera when we were recording yesterday, and uh, I think he was sad he wasn't going to be here for this to talk about his. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up on his behalf, because Alec Pierce is one of Jason's absolute recommends and favorites, and he's loved him since he came in the league. And I think it's just because Alec Pierce is what Jason wishes he could be if he could have gone pro. It's one of those things. I said that to him once, and he just started laughing, and he kind of like looked away, and I'm like, but he's having a great camp. Alec Pierce is having a great camp. He's playing ahead of AD Mitchell right now. Like Pierce is having a really solid camp, and it's the first time he's actually really been healthy, honestly,
Mhm.
because his rookie year was cut short, and then last year he played, but he was kind of beat up for a good chunk of that, and he was dealing with stuff all year. This year, supposedly, he's fully healthy. He's like full go for the first time in forever. So we're just gonna have to see. I'm not recommending drafting Alec Pierce, by the way, nor am I recommending drafting AD Mitchell. I'm willing to leave all of that out there for someone else to deal with. Let the nerd have it. Like he wants it so bad, go crazy, dude. You can just have it. I'm not gonna fight you about it. I'm more interested in downs by a good margin than any of the other wide receivers, project wide receivers, let's say.
Yeah, I agree. In
Well,
agreement there.
yeah, I feel bad because I know Jason. I know how much Jason loves his Alec Pierce. Um, but
It's just it boils down to like we're talking about concerns about their wide receiver one and volume. Like now we're talking about their wide receiver 3 or 4.
right,
It's just like
yeah.
we can't.
Speaking
Yeah,
of that, people down the list, Jelani Woods is going to play tight end again, and I think Marley Cox is still on the team. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
None of this
yeah.
matters. And the public agrees, by the way, because Jelani Woods opens as the tight end 29, 250 overall by rank, so that's expert rank. Where they're saying no, ADP is lower than that. It's 263.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not interested.
No, I put the Colts combined stats. They had 4 guys last year
Hmm.
putting up these numbers, and if you could draft a tight end for the
Yeah,
whole team, it's like
if
okay, yeah,
if one
yeah,
guy did it, he'd be like a
it's
top
not going to
15
be
tight end. But it's
yeah,
not one guy. It's a
no.
good luck figuring that out.
I think the most one of their tight ends had was like 350 yards, and guess what?
Yeah,
All those guys are back.
yeah, I know.
Branson,
It's just the team they
Mallory Cox,
have. They're
Will Mallory, yeah, they're all
because they all
back.
do other jobs.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they keep them is that they all block. They all do other
Mhm.
stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like okay, I get why this is happening. So the Colts that we talked about this briefly before we started doing this. The Colts is actually relatively cut and dry. It's all going to come down to can Anthony Richardson take that developmental step to take this team to the next level because the
Yeah.
defense is ready. We don't normally talk about defenses, but their defense is good. This is a team that has a good defense.
Yep.
I would expect this team, if their offense isn't totally horrible, should be playing with a lead in a lot of games because that defense is projected. We'll see if they can make it gel, but projection they look good.
Yeah.
So that's a concern, but it's frustrating because the pieces you want are all very expensive and are yeah, like Richardson and Taylor are both very expensive, worth it
Mhm.
potentially on Richardson, but that and then Pittman is becoming expensive because he's played so well over the last couple of years. So you really have three things that are feel good about, but they're all sticker price retail. So there's only one value play on the team, and that's Josh Downs.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is.
If you want to gamble, go for Richardson. Yeah.
Yes.
If you want to play it safe, just pass him.
If you like to YOLO, if you are that kind of person that likes to just go hard, Anthony Richardson. Can't say enough about how much you'll enjoy that experience, because you'll either win in dominant style, or you'll be done with fantasy football by week 4, and you won't have to care about this anymore. You can just do something else with your free time.
He's going to be one of those players where it's like late in the third quarter and he has 5 points and you're freaking out. And then you look at the end, it's like, oh, he actually got 22.
You're out doing something, and then you like, oh God, why did I do this? Why did I do this to myself? He's got 6 points and it's the start of the fourth quarter, and you flip back and he's got 30, and it's like, oh, 4 touchdowns, and
exactly.
Okay. Whatever. Like, I'm not gonna question it. We're just moving on. Like, if you live like that, and that's how you want to be, if you're a thrill seeker, that's definitely one. But any other thoughts on the Colts before we wrap it up? I think we're pretty much there.
No, we're good.
All right. Well, tune in tomorrow as we continue our little trip around the AFC South, and we're going to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's just sad, because I used to love doing this when Gardner Minshew was their quarterback, but it's not as fun anymore. But anyway, we'll catch you tomorrow, and until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!